Hi guys, my name's Sam and today I'm going to walk you through how to assemble and configure your very own ultimate retro gaming console. Now this is a bundle that we've just launched and it's fantastic. It includes two of the new 8Bitdo SF30 Pro controllers. They've got dual analog thumbsticks along with triggers, motion control, a host of great other features. Check out the product page for those if you're after some more info. But I'm going to walk you through the whole build process with the bundle and also some tips that you'll need along the way if you are putting together the same system with bits and pieces that you might already have, such as a blank SD card and how to format it correctly. So in the bundle, you will receive one of our pre-flashed RetroPie SD cards. You can plug it in and it's ready to go. A NESPi case by RetroFlag. These are amazing. Raspberry Pi 3 board, two of the SF30 Pros, 1 meter HDMI cable, and the official Raspberry Pi 2.5 amp 5 volt power supply. So before we begin, I'll walk you through the process of how to create your own RetroPie SD card. This is useful if you're using an SD card you've already got lying around the house, one that you've already used for a Raspberry Pi project, or just a blank one that you've gone out and bought. If you have got your own card, I recommend that you make sure it's at least an 8 gig card that is class 10, and that's going to ensure you get the maximum possible performance out of your system because everything runs off the card. So in order to do this, if it is a blank card you've just gotten, then it should be good to go as long as it's formatted to FAT32. But if not, if you've already got a partition on it from an old Raspberry Pi project, for example, then you'll plug it in and it'll come up with some sort of error like this. So we're just going to cancel this. Now, I won't go through this whole process because I've linked to it in a tutorial that Michael put together on repairing your SD card, but I'll just go through the process quickly so you can see what I'm doing and follow along. So opened up the command prompt. Now here we want to launch a tool called diskpart. Yes. Now insert your SD card in there and we're going to go list disk. Find our card, so I know that it's the 14 gig option, 16 gig card, not quite maximum capacity because of the way it handles the storage. Select that one, disk one. Now we're going to go clean and create partition primary. And that is all you need to do with the command line. So we can exit out of that. Now we can go into our card. It will come up with format disk again this time. Hit format disk. Should see the full, close to the full capacity there, FAT32, start. And it will format it. Again, you will lose any data that was on there, so make sure that's backed up if you need it. And that is now good to go, and we can flash our RetroPie image to it. So to do that, I've got a link here. We'll need to use a tool called the Win32 Disk Imager. If you're on Windows, perfect. If you're on a different operating system, I've linked you to some alternate programs there. Make sure you've got the fresh version of RetroPie downloaded here. So get the Raspberry Pi 2/3 build, very important. And then you'll also need an extraction tool such as 7-zip to extract the image. So I've already downloaded that to save us some time. Now, here is the download file. It'll be a .img.gz file. And so we can extract that 7-zip, extract files here. Again, I've already done it, save us some time, and you get this image file here. Now, what you need to do is open up Win32 Disk Imager. Make sure you've got the appropriate image selected. Now select your disk and make sure you've got the correct one and you're not targeting a different disk. So I can see there's a couple of options here. I want to select drive D because that is my freshly formatted card. Okay, and now we can go right. And it will flash that image onto the card for us. It's all sorted, which is fantastic. Now, while it's doing that, I'll walk you through how to assemble the case. So we take our NESPi case here, set these to the side. I'll just mention now as well that for this tutorial, we'll need a keyboard, either a USB wireless or wired keyboard, a blank USB drive. It doesn't need to be very big at all. Obviously a computer so you can download your ROM and flash it onto your USB to transfer. And also an external HDMI to screen so we can see what's going on. So we don't need those for the assembly process. Now these NESPi cases are something else. They are terrific, absolutely love it. I've got one set up at home. It comes with a little manual, which is a useful guide. It's not super detailed, but it does show you where things go. We're not going to use that for now. We've got our case. little orange screwdriver, and some screws. So set that to the side and take your Raspberry Pi board out. Make sure you're only handling it on the edges so we don't cause any damage. There we go. Alrighty, so just top off your case, just pulls apart. We can see we've got our Ethernet connector for the Ethernet port, USB connector for the two hidden USB connectors and the two exposed USBs, and then also a GPIO connector for power. So when we put the lid on, you can see it's got this little hinge door for the two USB and Ethernet, which is pretty handy. Probably won't be using Ethernet all that much given the Pi 3 has onboard Wi-Fi, but yeah, it's a neat feature. Take your board, insert it on an angle through the HDMI and 3.5mm jack connectors on the back, and it will seat correctly, and you can see where the mounting holes on the board align with the mounting posts in the case. In your plastic bag full of screws, go ahead and take out 2 of the black screws. We only need 2 because those other 2 screw holes are where the remaining screws will go to secure the case together. Now go ahead and put your screw in, like so. And screw it in so it's reasonably tight, but not over tight. We don't need to compress the board down too much because it will be held fairly solidly in place. So once you feel that resistance there, you can stop. Okay. And these are just standard Phillips head screws, so you're welcome to use another screwdriver if you wish. So coming there, a bit more. As I said, it is important to make sure you don't over tighten these screws. So there we go, our Raspberry Pi board's nice and snug. Take your Ethernet cable here, putting it underneath the USB cable and making sure it doesn't get snagged on that little post on the side. It does happen. Put it into the Ethernet port. It is a little tight, but if you wiggle it around, it's not too bad. Feel that click in. Take the USB connector and plug it into any of the USB ports, and that breaks out those to there. And now power is actually provided via the micro USB port on the case here, and that breaks it out, runs it along to these breakout boards, and then finally powers your Pi by the GPIO connector. Don't want to format that. Our card's just finished flashing. Cancel, cancel, cancel. So there's an image here of how you want to mount this GPIO connector because it's quite important. Make sure that the red and the black wire go on the GPIO pins furthest away from the HDMI port, so closest to these breakout boards and all the way up the very end, because if you connect it up incorrectly, it can damage, temporarily or permanently damage your Pi. So double check it before you power anything on. But that's it. That's all we need to assemble for our board. Put the top on the case like so. Go ahead and take your 6 silver screws from the bag and mount them into the holes underneath. All right, so now you've inserted those screws, make sure they are nice and tight so the case can't pull away at the edges, but not too tight that you've potentially stripped the thread from the holes because it is only a plastic case, but it is injection molded, really, really nice quality case. I love it. So that's all there is to the assembly. So go ahead and get rid of some of those bits and pieces. And we can now take a HDMI cable. I'm going to use this one so it's connected up to the screen capture so you can see what's going on. Your power supply. So again, it is important, worth noting that we really recommend this power supply, especially for this build, because the micro USB connector doesn't directly connect up to the Raspberry Pi. There's some extra wire going on along the way, which if you're using an underrated power supply can cause issues. This actually outputs just above 5 volts, so it accounts for that voltage drop along the cable, which is really important, especially when it's under load, and the 2.5 amps will support your any USB devices as well. Let's go ahead and connect that guy up there. Now, it doesn't power up, which is exactly what it's supposed to be doing because there's 2 power switches on the front here. One is for power and it is a latching switch, and the other is just a momentary reset switch. So take your card, take the one I just imaged, take the micro SD card out of the adapter, insert it with the gold contacts facing up into the micro USB connector like so. We're now ready to power it on. The red light will come on, everything is magical. So we now get to connect up our Bluetooth controllers, which is pretty exciting. But before we do that, we need to use our USB keyboard, because in order to do so, we need to navigate through the RetroPie system. Now, to do that, we need a way of navigating it, a controller, before we can connect these up. So we need a keyboard that isn't Bluetooth, that we don't have to configure, because USB devices work out of the box. That's why they're so wonderful. All right, so I'll just wait until that boots up. Switch over there so you can see what's going on. Now, when this boots up, we're going to go through and map the keyboard, then connect to the Bluetooth controllers, which we can then use to play our games. And lastly, we'll be loading up some ROM. So it goes through this boot process. And the first time it boots up, it will go through that blue screen that you might have seen before, but it has to resize the file partition. Don't worry about all that. Just wait until it boots up. Emulation station, fantastic. So the first time, because there's no controller connected, we get this screen. So just hold a key in and go through. Now, all we need to do is map the directional keys for navigation. Start, select A and B. So go ahead, do those. You can use different keys if you like, but just make sure you remember what they are. You can always go through and remap it if need be, as long as you know your directional arrows and start and A. If not, you can just flash your card, or you can go through the command line in the terminal access to reset the controller configuration settings, but it's more hassle than it's worth. Just make sure you get it right. And to skip past all these extra controls like you can see I'm doing, just hold any key. I recommend one you haven't already mapped so it doesn't accidentally map to that. And just hold it down until it skips past the selection. We'll be mapping all of these controls to our Bluetooth controllers because they do have all of the the extended control set. But for our keyboard, we don't need it at all. Newish feature of RetroPie is it's got this hotkey enable feature, which is really cool, which will map to our Bluetooth controllers. Yes, we'll use select for hotkey for now, even though we're not going to use it. RetroPie, welcome. This is our RetroPie homepage. So we don't have any emulators, as you can see, because by default, all the emulators are hidden until there is a compatible ROM file found for them. It doesn't come with any ROMs. We need to load them on ourselves. So this is all we see. Huge number of emulators for RetroPie, so it would be really cluttered if it showed them all. So press A to go into the menu, scroll down to Bluetooth, and it's time for us to get our controller out. So take one of them. I'm just going to do the process once, but it will be the exact same process. You just repeat it twice, once for each controller. Make sure I've got the right one. I charged one of these before we started. I'll make sure I've got it. It's this one. This is the one I want. So yeah, make sure it is fully charged before you use it, or at least it has some charge. It doesn't strictly have to be fully charged. The batteries in these are pretty good. Take it out, get rid of the plastic. And a trick here is, which did get me the first time I was setting it up, in the manual, 8Bitdo have released a few different firmware revisions based on different modes for console. So you can see that you've got Switch, Android, Windows, and Mac, which you think, well, which mode am I supposed to use? What they don't tell you is that all of those modes are selected by holding in buttons and the start button to power it on. But if you just hold the start button, it launches into a bit of a generic mode, which is exactly what we want. So just hold the start button down. The lights are not bright at all. They should have made them a bit brighter, but you can see them sort of flashing here while it's not connected to anything. And what we want to do is see that, put our controller to the side, and we're going to go register and connect to Bluetooth devices. Bit of a weird thing here. I'm not sure whether it's a 8Bitdo-ism or a RetroPie-ism, that it won't show the controller ID name, or sorry, the controller name, the first time you search for devices. So you sort of just have to go cancel and research for it, and eventually it picks up and it'll say Pro Controller. You can, of course, go off the ID if you want to go in, find the controller ID and do it that way. But it's more hassle than it's worth, honestly. It's easy just to do this. So we can see there, Pro Controller. If it doesn't come up for you, just give it another couple of goes. Make sure that your lights are flashing on the controller. So hit OK. Just press Enter again. Skip past those settings. Don't need to worry about them. Successfully registered and connected. And that first light, if this is your first controller, will be on solid. Exactly what we want. Now we need to go through and go set up UDEV rule for joypad. Select Pro Controller. We'll say reboot to take effect. We'll reboot it in a second. We don't need to worry about doing that now. Now, importantly, configure Bluetooth Connect mode. So by default, it will only connect manually. So we want to make it so it connects in the background. So anytime we turn the controller on, no matter what the system's doing, it'll detect that and connect to it. We go background, force connecting to devices in background, okay. And that's all there is to it. Make sure your 8Bitdo mapping hack is set to off for new firmware. Cancel to exit out of the menu. Our controller is now connected to the Bluetooth, via Bluetooth to the system, but we need to configure it. So hit enter again to go to the main menu. Configure input, hit A, and we're going to go through exactly the same process we went through, but for our controller. So hold the button, it'll detect it there, and let go as soon as it does, because otherwise it'll detect the key press. So we've got D-pad up, fairly self-explanatory here, up, down, left, right, start and select, then A, B, X, and Y. Got left shoulder, left trigger, right trigger, left thumb, which is the button on the thumbstick. Make sure you press it without moving the thumbstick or it'll accidentally detect that. Right thumb, cool. Left analog up, make sure you're pressing it in the exact axes, just to be safe, so up. So 1 minus, 1 plus, should be 0 minus, yep, 0 plus. Same for the right, down, left, right. Hotkey enable, use that button. Seems like a good button. Press A, and away we go. This is now fully configured and mapped to our system. We can navigate with it. It's beautiful, beautiful. But again, we still don't have any games to play it with. So go ahead and repeat that process with your second controller, both the Bluetooth setup and the mapping. You can hit both Bluetooths at once, then both mappings at once, and it's time for us to load some games up. Now, a word of warning before we start. It is a bit of a gray area with using ROMs, but at core, we use a really simple principle for loading ROMs up onto our machines. If you own the physical copy of the game, you are allowed to use the ROM on your machine. If not, then you can't. So all of the games that we use, we have the physical copy of the game. Super Mario World on SNES is the one I will be loading up today. You are, of course, welcome to use your RetroPie console however you like, but that is how we choose to lead to make sure that we're not violating any copyright issues in respecting original work. Let's go ahead and remove some of that clutter. Now, I've included some links here, let's get past this, to some YouTube videos showing you where you can find ROMs. But a word of warning is make sure you don't download anything that's a .exe extension. That's a really classic issue that can trip people up where they're downloading a Trojan or some malware that is going to wreck their computer. So just be really careful with the files that you are downloading. So I've included some of the popular file extensions, required file extensions for popular ROMs as taken from the RetroPie website. I've included a link there, the RetroPie GitHub page. But for NES, SNES, N64, GBA, Mega Drive, PS1, those are the file extensions that RetroPie will accept, and they're the only ones that you should download. So with that in mind, go ahead and download your ROMs. I've already got Super Mario World downloaded here. So this is where we need to use our USB drive. Let's take it out and plug it into your computer. I've got a USB port down here. Now, we're not going to be formatting it, so it's okay if you've got data that's already on there. Now, what we want to do is go in here and create a new folder in the top level of your drive and call it RetroPie, all lowercase, exactly as I've done. That's all we need to do. Unplug it, and we're going to insert it into our Pi. And what it does is, on reboot, it will look for this folder, and if it sees it, it will create an entire folder subsystem subfolders inside of it in which we can put our ROM. So it's a really easy way to transfer games on there. So as always, you want to make sure that you are, whenever you restart or shut down, unless you've customized your console, that you don't just hit the power button or pull the power out, because that can corrupt data. So go into the quit in the main menu, hit restart system. And if you are, restart. If you are shutting down, then hit shutdown, wait for it to fully turn off, hit remove your power, and then that's the safest way to do it. So we'll go through, wait for that to reboot. Now, you don't need to leave your USB drive in there the whole time, but generally, I think it's safer to wait until you see the emulation station screen pop up. That way, you know that it has been done correctly and you haven't pulled it out too early. So we'll wait for RetroPie to reboot here. Can take a few seconds. A bit of a downside to RetroPie system. It's the most flexible, most powerful operating system for emulation. Emulators, I should say, but it does have the downside of a long boot time. Now, it's probably already created this file system, but as I said, the activity light on the USB is still blinking, so I'm just going to leave it in to be safe and make sure it has created that. Emulation station. Cool. There we are. So pull your USB drive out, put it back into your computer. I'm going to go, it'll say there's a problem if you're on Windows. There's no problem. Don't worry about it. You can see it's created our folder system, exactly what we want. So I'm going to go there. Now I've got Super Mario World here. This is our ROM file. It's a .sfc file, which is a valid extension for the SNES system. There, all good. So take that, and you can name it whatever you want, so you can actually rename it and that'll reflect it in the system. But just as a word of warning, for particular systems, it is finicky about which version it is, so you know whether it's the PAL or a different, like designed for a different refresh rate for the old TVs. So if you notice your game isn't running at the correct speed, you may need to adjust the title or some settings inside of RetroPie. So copy that in, go to RetroPie, USB drive ROMs, find SNES just here or whatever system you wish, and just copy it in. And that's all you need to do. You can now unplug your USB drive, plug it back into your RetroPie system. Get rid of this keyboard, I don't really need it. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to restart the console. Restart. Oh, yeah, I have to turn the controller back on for it to connect. Funny about that. There we go. Configure, what do we want? Quit. Restart system. Cool. There we go. Now, while that's restarting, it's going to look through that file structure, and if it sees a valid ROM that it doesn't already have loaded onto the system, it will copy it over onto the card. So it's a really great way to just have a USB drive that has your whole ROM library on it, and that way when you want to put a new ROM on, you just add it in because it won't create duplicates of ROMs that it already has on the system. So it's a really smart system when it loads it up, so you won't have to worry about duplicates at all. It does have a file management system on the RetroPie operating system, but I think that the USB drive is an easier method for a lot of people to use. So once this boots up again, we can turn our controller on by just pressing start by itself. And once it turns on, we will see that our Super Mario World hard copy is on our system and we can play it. And that's all there is to it. We can see here we've now got the Super Nintendo emulator as an option. Enter into it, Super Mario World. And that's it, guys. We've now assembled our RetroPie machine, loaded ROMs onto it, connected our controllers, and that is how you set up your ultimate retro gaming console, whether it's in our bundle or from the various bits and pieces that you've collected if you've already used a Raspberry Pi, perhaps. I hope this video was useful. If you have any questions or want to, get some more information about a step of the process, if you're not sure, then just leave a comment down below. You're more than welcome to, and I'll get straight to them. That's all there is for today, guys. I hope you enjoy and happy gaming.